Just as an introduction for people who don't know me, I'm JD Tovey. I'm the planning director at the Umatilla Indian Reservation here in Pendleton. And what we'll do is we'll go over a few things. I think Holly, and we have a recording from our transportation planner. She pre-recorded a little snippet for her portion of it. And then I believe Sam, our environmental health and safety officer, will be having a small little piece as well. The breadth of what we'll be talking about is like some of the capital improvements projects, some of the ways that we're trying to improve that process, you know, taking it into resource utilization, reduction of water, and those other things like that. And then I'll kind of wrap up my piece. I know we only have about half an hour, 40 minutes, so we'll try and get through as much as we can. There's tons of information. But then I'll kind of wrap up with some kind of general thoughts on the future of our infrastructure projects and major building projects. So I don't know, Holly, do you want to go first? Or do we want to do Dani's first, Colleen?
I'd be happy to go first, or we can do Dani's, either way.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Well, I'm going to talk through some of my slides. They just have words on them mostly, and then I will share at some point. But so what we're going to talk about is some of the things regarding climate resiliency for the built environment, what the Tribal Planning Office is already doing, and touch on some additional things that perhaps we could do. And I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity to talk and brainstorm across departments. It's been really instrumental in learning what other departments are doing so we can collaborate better. So some of the things that the Tribal Planning Office is already doing, we have our comprehensive plan, a sub-area plan for the mission community. We have our development codes and permit process. We have our capital improvements plan, and I also want to touch on the hazard mitigation plan. So regarding the comprehensive plan, this talks about what are the tribe's goals and how we want to achieve them. It helps to keep us on track by setting benchmarks and monitoring progress. And I want to share now the screen. Does that show up for you?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and I just want to show you how easy it is to get to the comprehensive plan on our website. If you go to the main CTUIR page, I'm going to slide over to the where you can see it. And then if you search for planning.
Holly, I think we might only be able to see your slides right now.
Oh, will it take a minute to show up, or?
It might. I think if you use the share function of just the PowerPoint window, it's only going to share the PowerPoint window. But I think if you pick that selection to the far left, it's going to be able to follow you in the way that you're moving on your computer. So you might want to unshare and share again.
Okay.
Sorry for the complication.
So, hold on.
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
I already realized that I messed up and I didn't even show you guys my speaker introduction slide. So this is the way that the day is going to go, unfortunately.
All right. I think, here we go.
Oh, perfect. Yep, that looks like it'll do it.
You see it?
Yep, we see the web page.
So if you go to the website and you search for planning, and you can see that long range planning comes up. And if you click on that, you can scroll down and there's a link to the comprehensive plan. Now the comprehensive plan has many different elements in it. And I just want to highlight that there's a couple, that there's policies in here that are really great on the subject of climate adaptation. So for instance, under economy, I'm just going to search for that policy 5.2, and one of the economic policies is to diversify the tribe's public sector economy by creating and strengthening CTUIR and enterprises. And actually the one I wanted was number 5, plan for long-term economic security in the face of changing global environmental and economic conditions. So that's really relevant. And some of the ways that that's proposed to be done is by having a diverse economic plan, not only the casino, but other businesses as well, and support small businesses. Another one we have in here is 5.15 is our energy policy, energy element. And the first objective here is to enhance tribal sovereignty through energy independence. And then there's various strategies and monitoring benchmarks to monitor how those are being achieved. One of the ones that planning works on a lot is housing, and that has some great policies in it. Expand the number of and types of all housing units on the reservation for tribal members at all income levels. So I want to talk about some of the ways that we have been working to achieve those housing policies. So now are we back on the presentation?
Yes, we see the PowerPoint.
Implementing the housing policy by last year, we changed the land development code to allow accessory dwelling units. This allows an extra living unit on each property in the residential zones that's not in the flood zone, maximum size of 1,000 square feet. And so creating more housing opportunities across residential zones in the reservation. A second policy, second initiative is that the neighborhoods that we're creating, we want to be close to employment and services and be walkable. And so we are working on a subdivision just west of the Transit Center, which has recently been named the Nick Yahweh subdivision. And that is going to have nice streets with street trees and sidewalks. It's also going to have alleys for access. And the zoning that we created for it allows small lots, as well as the accessory dwelling units. And there are some lots that will be zoned for neighborhood services where a few small scale commercial and service uses can be located close to the residential. This is the example of a street profile that we're likely to see in the Nick Yahweh subdivision. And this subdivision was really, the visioning for it was started as part of the Mission Community Plan update. There was various technical reports that were done looking at housing demand, transportation needs, and zoning as well. And so that informed the vision that's now occurring with the Nick Yahweh subdivision. This subdivision is under review right now, and the hearing on it is before the Land Protection Planning Commission on March 23rd. Another way that the planning department can help with climate resiliency is through our land development code. These codes are zoning helps to protect the resource lands. We have requirements for setbacks from streams to help protect the streams and the structures that might be located near them. And we have our flood overlay zone that we adopted a number of years ago adjacent to the Umatilla River to restrict where development can be located so that houses don't end up getting flooded. Now, we did have a flood last year where some homes were flooded out, and most of those were either in the floodway or in the flood plain, the 100-year flood plain. And the river is changing over time. And so one of the things that's happening is that there's going to be a remapping of the floodplain, and that's in process by FEMA. And I just wanted to mention that the flood hazard overlay zone that we've adopted makes the reservation eligible for FEMA flood insurance. And so right now there's a hazard mitigation grant that's being used to purchase 11 properties that were flooded out during the floods last year. In addition to the remapping of the floodplain, another way that planning could plan ahead would be to track areas that are being flooded and keep track of that in a public place as the river changes. I think that will be helpful for us and for residents. In addition to our land development code, we have our building codes. We've adopted the International Building Code, and this is primarily for safety, that construction is done in a safe manner and that a permit process is followed with plans that are reviewed ahead of time, approved, and then inspections during the construction process. Additionally, with the network of building and code professionals, there's additional technical resources that we can take advantage of. There's a lot of information out about fire smart communities, how communities can compile, how communities can build for homes that are on the edge of the forest area in ways that manage the landscaping and use materials that help to keep down embers from starting fires on houses during fire events. Another thing is that there's a technical appendix to the International Building Code that talks about straw home bale construction, and there's other alternative building materials that there's lots of information out, so we can make some of those things more available on our website and perhaps actually adopt some of them into code. Additionally, we have our capital improvements plan, and last year we adopted an update to this where we now are going to have a 3-year cycle where the community can give input into our list of capital improvements, and we'll evaluate those projects based on impacts to resources, including water availability will be an important thing to make sure that we review for. I want to link to our website. And let's see, does the website show up right now?
Yes.
Okay, so the first article on there is regarding our capital improvements program. And we have a web map that's been developed for us by our GIS section. And this web map is an interactive tool that allows comment on the different capital improvements. So each point here represents a capital improvement project. So this one here is for the Nikyaway subdivision. It has a little description of it and talks about time frame. And the time frame for this is very short. It's ground is likely to be broken this summer for it. So if we wanted to comment on this project, just click this. We have to fill in a name there for it to take the comments, and we can select a priority level, how we feel about this. We like the project, and then we could add some comments and submit them, and they're all tracked in an app that the Tribal Planning Office can view. So another project I'd like to highlight is down South Market Road. We have our pandemic preparedness building. And this will help us be ready for future events where emergency supplies and food are needed. And there's also well number 6 that's farther down here on South Market Road that probably Public Works and other folks talking today will be talking more about that. But that helps to create additional water supply for our community. So let's see, back to, whoops, I lost my presentation. There we are. We also are going through a process for the July grounds area of planning what that area can be used for. We have this preliminary July Grounds Master Plan that was developed. JD did several meetings on this and has received input, and that's all been put into this preliminary master plan, which is really just a collection of ideas that will potentially become projects in the future as funding is found for them and as more details are planned around them. So we invite you to look at this. This is available as part of that article that's on the first page of the website. And so you can scroll into some of these areas and read about them, and you're welcome to submit comments through the July Grounds point on the web map, or you can just email tpo@ctuir.org and submit detailed comments that way. Finally, I'd like to mention our hazard mitigation plan. This is something that the Public Works Department is very instrumental in, but also planning has been involved in the past. And it's very important that it's being kept up to date because it is required to be up to date for FEMA disaster assistance. And secondly, it's very important that we implement it after the strategies are come up with, that we have someone on point to help implement those strategies. So I would like to turn it back over to JD for, or maybe Dani's presentation is next. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think, do you want to, Colleen, do you want to go with Dani's presentation?
Yes, and I have it queued up here. So
okay.
Let me get that running. Share. So you're going to get some double vision here for a second. All right. Sound is important. Okay. Hang on. There's like an order of operations here that I need to, oh, there's the sound. All right. So please let me know if you can't hear anything. If Dani starts talking and you can't hear anything, give me a shout. Here goes.
Hi. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dani Schulte. I'm the transportation planner for the CTUIR. I've been in this role for the past year, and I've worked for the tribe for about 2.5 years now. Sorry I can't be there in person, but I really appreciate Colleen for making accommodations and letting me share some information by recorded video. So today I'm talking about transportation dimensions of climate change mitigation. My job is primarily wrapped up in roads and trails, which is not the most exciting topic, but it is how we all get around to all of the places that we actually want to go and care about and think about. CTUIR has been making significant investment in climate change mitigation in the built environment for decades. One of the most visible being the movement of the Government Services Center from the low-lying, flood-prone July Grounds campus to the new Nikyawi campus, which began over a decade ago. Kayak is also a really important achievement. In the 2001 Transportation System Plan, it was just a dream, and it's now an award-winning transit system that provides greater access than the vast majority of rural transit networks. So that is a really impressive achievement of the tribe generally and the folks that work really hard at Kayak to provide those services. But transportation accounts for the largest share of US greenhouse gas emissions. So doing our part to combat climate change includes finding ways to support people who would like to switch to non-polluting transportation modes. In our community, this might not be for all of their trips, since it is a very rural, spread out community for the most part, but we can create opportunities and support folks when those opportunities arise. One of the ways the tribe already does this is compact development surrounding the new Nikyawi campus. Initially, the campus movement was a trip generator, but as residential lots open up for development over the next year or two, more people will be close enough to walk to work, school, recreation, and services. The new development area includes space zoned for small businesses as well, which will further increase opportunities for services to be located within walking distance of tribal residences on a fairly small scale. So things like maybe a hair salon or, you know, a cafe or bodega, something like that. The tribe is also working on increasing walking and biking paths. In 2020, we won an ODOT Safe Routes to School grant award to complete the path from July Grounds to the Nikyawi Community School. So to bridge the gap where students might now walk along Highway 331 on the shoulder. This will open up opportunities for students particularly, but of course, because there's plenty of new buildings there, the NGC and Yellow Hawk as well, it will also create opportunities for other folks walking to get to their destination safely in an active mode. Looking ahead, there are a number of ways we can build climate resilient infrastructure. We can make sure that new roads, paths, and bridges are located in climate resilient locations, such as away from flood prone areas. And this is already something that our code requires. But as we saw last year, the increasing severity and frequency of natural disasters will show us where we need to do better. Improving the climate resilience of existing roads and other transportation facilities will also be important. We can, use tools such as permeable pavement and swales in existing flood-prone areas, and try to move roads out of areas vulnerable to flooding where possible. Another way we can combat climate change is to keep mandatory minimum off-street parking low in new development areas. Homeowners can choose how many cars they want to make space for. And if they choose to reduce their vehicle space because they can walk to many of their destinations, planning isn't going to stop them. We can also continue to expand opportunities for walking, bicycling, horse riding, and other non-polluting transportation modes. This has been in the transportation system plan for at least 20 years now. But now the task is finding funding and prioritizing those efforts to make roads safer for non-car users or create separate safe facilities for them. And one important way to reduce emissions is to bring people close to where they need to go. And this means increasing tribal investment in dense urban or suburban type areas like the Mission Corps and the city of Pendleton. This reduces personal vehicle dependency and maybe a preferred living choice for some tribal members, perhaps who, enjoy living in Pendleton. And finally, we've considered things like a street tree policy for developed and developing neighborhoods to encourage planting native and climate resilient species that will make walking and biking safer and more pleasant by providing shade and a further bonus, carbon capture. So this is a good time to be thinking about these things. Over the next 2 years, we'll be updating the transportation system plan and asking the community how they envision their transportation needs to be changing over the next 20 years. Climate resilience will, of course, be central in those discussions. If you have any questions, my colleagues may be able to answer them in your live video, or you can shoot me an email at danischulte@ctuir.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Dani and Holly, for that really amazing information. It's really exciting that there's going to be some new planning efforts and moving old planning goals forward. JD, did you want to introduce our next speaker, or how do we want to do this?
Certainly. Thank you. And I think our third one is Samantha Matlock. She is our new Environmental Health and Safety Officer. She has a quick little presentation on the stuff she's working on. So go ahead, Sam.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
and we can see
great.
your slides.
Perfect. So I'm Samantha Matlock. I've been here since August, and I'm just going to do a brief overview on climate adaptation from an environmental health perspective. Okay, so as we all know, with climate change, we're going to have an increase in floods, increase in wildfires, increase in temperatures, which leads to droughts. Some of the solutions that we've already talked about is new infrastructure such as wells, the well number 6 project, and wastewater treatment using renewable energy. And protecting the resources we already have, such as well infrastructure, domestic wells, testing them for water quality and identifying high bacteria areas during emergencies and after, as well as creating a domestic well program or code that enforces the water quality standards for domestic wells. Also looking at septic infrastructure, making sure during, after floods, they're being assessed and maintained. And we're using hazard mitigation techniques such as risers for septic tanks in the future. Some of the work that I've been doing since August for septic systems, this is a septic system where the sewage was past the inlet, which means that it was infiltrated during the flood and could possibly lead to backups of the septic system. I always recommend take pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So because I was able to demonstrate flood areas and that our septic systems were in flood areas after the February flood with lots of pictures of the damage, we were able to assess approximately 55 homes with their septic tanks, pump their systems and assess for additional damage, and to see if there was any pooling of water on their drain field. Some of the things that we do during the floods are just giving out tips to homeowners, making sure that they know what to do with their wells and not to drink the water directly after the flood if they haven't tested or treated with bleach solution. Now, in last April, over 100 homes were tested for total coliform and E. coli, which is bacteria, in their wells, and they were retested if they were positive and also treated with a bleach solution. This summer, I'm going to be retesting all of these homes for total coliform and E. coli, as well as nitrates, and mapping them with GIS to make sure we identify areas that may have high bacteria loads in the future in flood areas. I already touched on the fact that since the flood, we're doing water testing and additional water testing. However, this summer, with a hazard mitigation grant, you can see on the left in that picture is a septic riser. We plan to install 40 risers at homes. And so in the future, it will be easier to identify tanks that may have been full or damaged during a flood and be able to better come up with a solution to make sure that they don't have sewage backing into their homes. We also this summer assessed 55 septic tanks. This included getting site plans for people's systems, identifying and locating their system, giving them a maintenance schedule information, contact information for the pumpers, as well as the environmental health officer if they had additional questions or concerns regarding their tanks. I also identified old systems that needed to be removed, such as metal tanks to prevent leaching into groundwater. Some of the things that I'll be doing in the future this summer with the hazard mitigation grant is to create videos of what to do before the flood, during a flood, or after the flood in regards to homeowners' septic tanks and wells. These videos will be available via social media or on our website. to give more information to people to reach out during a flood or after an emergency. This is just one homeowner that we helped this summer and fall. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is a septic tank. When we showed up, it was completely full of sewage. They were having backup issues in the home. And you can see in the middle picture, the tank is less than 2 feet from the property. This is a very old tank. And no longer are we putting metal tanks in the ground due to leaching of metals. And so I'm currently working with this homeowner. We were able to identify what it was in the ground and to try to access Indian Health Services funds and remove this for the homeowner to prevent future issues in a next flood. Tribal Food Code. I also am the regulator for the Tribal Food Code for CTUIR. I regulate the FDA food code. There's several versions. The newest version is 2017. I perform semi-annual inspections on all restaurants, daycare, school kitchens, any temporary vendors, such as during the powwow or 4th of July. There's also a cottage food bill that allows me to do inspections for domestic kitchens if people are baking cookies or cupcakes, non-potentially hazardous foods at their homes to sell. I also give instructions to people how to get their food handlers cards online and where that training's available. I'm also available to do in-person food handlers training as well. Some of the future things that we're looking at for food sovereignty and in regards to climate change is possibly a commercial kitchen. The next steps for that would be somebody doing a feasibility study. There's several of these commercial kitchen examples in our area and in the Portland area. I've listed a few, such as Blue Mountain Station Road in Dayton and Mercado and the Red facility in Portland. Some of the things that I also am watching in regards to food sovereignty on the tribe is last year, House Bill 4206 was passed, which allows Oregon Department of Agriculture to regulate livestock slaughter and processing, which hasn't been done in the state of Oregon in decades. That did not come with a funding bill attached to it. So this year was introduced House Bill 2785 to establish programs to fund upgrades to establishments expected to operate for livestock slaughter. Some of the goals that we're currently working on that other people mentioned is well number 6 that's being implemented currently. Also the Nikiawe subdivision. Water sewer infrastructure will be installed for 50 residential lots and 12 commercial/residential lots. This will allow tribal members to move back to CTUIR ground from Pendleton and remove them from flood areas. As well as we're looking at putting in a wastewater treatment facility in the future that would allow us to be self-sufficient and reuse gray water to water lawns such as the Governance Center and the golf course. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available via email or my phone number. Email is Samantha Matlock at ctuir.org. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. That was so great. That's a lot of new information that I didn't even know, really. I mean, I learned so much during all of this. So thank you so much for that area of expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I think we only have about 5 minutes left on our portion. Is that right, Colleen?
I believe so. Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Okay, great. And the only thing I just wanted to wrap up with is, you know, my staff has done an amazing job pulling that together. But one of the things I did want to kind of bring this all together on is the biggest impact to climate change, especially in decisions made about infrastructure, is actually personal choice. A couple of things I wanted to really highlight is just like the decision on lot size. Over the last 60 or 70 years, we've seen lot sizes get bigger and bigger, where people want, 50-foot lots, then they want 75-foot lots, and they want 100-foot lots. They just want bigger and bigger lots, and the implications of that is that it requires more and more land to be converted from green fields into housing projects. But even more importantly is, like, if you take a 50-foot lot, that requires 50 foot of concrete for sidewalks, it requires 50 feet of asphalt for roads, it requires 50 feet of pipe and fiber and copper and sewer lines, and it requires 50 feet. But if you double that to 100 foot, now suddenly you have twice all that. So your life cycle analysis for the carbon that's embodied within all that, so instead of having 100 feet or 50 feet of pipe, you now have 100 feet of pipe to still serve only one house, which requires twice the amount of petroleum pulled out of the ground. It requires twice the amount of copper it takes to be mined. It takes twice the amount of fiber optic to be created. It takes twice the amount of land that's converted. And so all these hundreds of millions of small choices that individuals make is actually what is the major fuel of climate change. Just choosing a 100-foot lot is doubling the amount of carbon that lot is taking to require to make. And then it also requires twice as much lawn mowing. It requires twice as much fertilizer on the ground. It requires twice as much, everything. So I really want to make sure that everyone's really understanding their own personal choices have impacts on climate change. One other thing, an example that it'll bring up too, is also the connectivity between these things. And the story that I have is about, I had an employee tell me that they needed bigger parking lots out here at NGC. We needed bigger parking spaces because they drive a dually. And my first question is like, why do you need to drive a dually to the NGC to sit at a desk? That was my first question, but that didn't matter really much. But the conversation kind of went around. It's like, well, I need a dually for my work or my off hours work. I said, well, the parking lot's almost full. I said, well, let's make the parking lot bigger. And so, well, that's a lot of money. And so that's a lot of money just to make a parking lot bigger, just so you can drive a dually to work. And then, interesting enough, just a few months later, that same individual had a conversation with them about getting rid of the mines up on the hill, like Bryant Mine and Padawa Mine and Grubbs Pit. Was that these are terrible on the landscape, and they tear up the soil and they tear up the rock and everything like that. And my first implication, the thing that occurred to me was that, just a few months ago, they were asking me to increase the parking lot size, and now they're asking me to get rid of the mines on the hill. And they didn't realize where the rock came from. Like, the rock to make the parking lot bigger came from those mines on the mountains right here. Like, that's literally where the rock comes from. And so it's really important for people to understand that there's a connectivity of everything. If you want more parking lots, then those parking lots are coming out of the mountain right here in our backyard. If we want bigger homes and bigger lots, then that is woods coming out of the forest. It's land that's being converted from green fields to urban fields. If we want more pipes, if we want bigger lots, if we want more water, if we want all those things, then that's more oil and petroleum that's mined. That's more copper that's mined. That's more fertilizer that's being required to feed lawns. It's more of everything, and it's really, really important, I think, for people to really understand their personal choices having massive impacts on the climate change issues, because that all feeds up into the political process. It feeds up into the planning process. It feeds up into personal choice. And it's just really, really important for people to understand that they have a personal role in the climate change solutions. That's my little soapbox.
That is an awesome soapbox. Thank you. I think that, sometimes we can forget that the way that we live is not just us. We're magnified times, a million, a billion people. And so thank you for bringing that context. Do you have any kind of closing words that you want to kind of end your session with?
No, I think that's about it. I think there's, and it's just about personal choices, and I've got 8 or 9 other examples that I can go on about personal choices that we wrestle with here in planning. People want to choose things that are not necessarily in the best interest, long-term best interest for themselves or the community. And so, but I can go on and on for hours. So I'm more interested in getting questions, actually.
Did anyone have any kind of like very specific clarifying questions for JD? Otherwise, we'll save the discussion for the end. We didn't have any come through in the chat, but if someone wants to feel